You're watching the C Spine Show. I'm Dr. Craig Callewart. Please like, follow, and subscribe. We had tornadoes again in Dallas. Unfortunately, two people were killed, but we are in a minor tornado alley, meaning it's not like it is west of Fort Worth or northeast of here, but it does strike Dallas. And when I was a kid, and I grew up about a mile and a half from here, my parents were building a house, and we were out working the area because at that time in Dallas it was still pretty rural. There was still a little bit of cotton here and there, and there were still some sheep. So we were out moving dirt and preparing the land, and the weather started looking bad. And so we sought shelter and ran into a local building there. And I remember intense winds, and I remember the intense rain, and then it all got very quiet. And so during that moment of time, we left the building, walked outside, and looked at our house, which at that time had been taken and partially flattened. And 4x8 sheets of plywood were literally circling in this vortex going up into the sky. And that impressed me of the power of tornadoes. So ever since then, I've been very respectful of tornadoes. We went back into that building. The storm came back and then finally leveled the house, which we rebuilt. But interestingly enough, Dallas got hit again about 5 or 6 years pretty badly, took a big chunk out of my old high school and took all the trees out of the neighborhood for 2 or 3 blocks, big old trees that were planted when that area was developed in the 60s. One poor lady moved in from somewhere out of state, built a nice house, and as they were moving in, got leveled by that tornado. They got through it, rebuilt the house. The following year, tornadoes came and leveled the same house. And she finally said, I'm out of here. And they went back out of state. So again, we have a great respect for tornadoes. So when the Weather Service was telling us at the time we were starting our taping that we were under a tornado watch and there had been some sightings, we decided to shut it down. But anyway, tornadoes have kind of, for me, the same adrenaline that surgery sometimes does, because in surgery, much of it is kind of routine and monotonous, and you're talking, and then all of a sudden the heart stops. Or all of a sudden a blood vessel that was pushed out of the way so that we could work straight down here shifts position and starts bleeding. And so it's very possible to go from calm to 100-mile-an-hour winds in a short period of time. And that's where the experience comes into play, and that's where being prepared comes into play. And that's also part of the enjoyment, the challenge of doing what I do. But the tornado that I had in the operating room on Monday was beyond reason and was not pleasurable. I had admitted an individual that I'd seen in the office roughly 2 days before. I admitted him to the hospital, and I told that individual, I'm going to put you on high-dose steroids and ask your insurance company if we can go ahead and do this surgery and bypass all the usual things that insurance wants because they consider it a check and a balance, because your spinal cord is acting like it's not receiving enough blood flow, and I don't want you to have a spinal stroke. So the patient then called me up 36 hours later and said, look, I'm really not doing well. I said, okay, you come into the hospital. I'll cancel what I'm doing. We're going to do your next surgery because you don't want to go paralyzed. So fortunately, he did. We were able to cancel another patient who was willing to step aside, did the surgery, went well. And then the insurance company calls my office and demands to talk to me while I was in surgery with a threat that if I don't, the hospital's not going to get paid, nobody's going to get paid, and the patient's going to get stuck with the bill. So my office probably should have said, sorry, he's in surgery, but they patched me through. And again, I'm in the middle of a case, and this patient is actively bleeding, and this insurance doctor is telling me, I got to know X, Y, and Z. And I said, look, this guy's bleeding. I cannot talk to you. I finally said some 4-letter words and disconnected, and thought I might let our local elected officials know about this, but ultimately that individual who was calling me made the right decision and decided the emergency surgery was really medically necessary. But that was the tornado that was in my operating room on Monday, just after the tornado that was in Dallas on the previous Tuesday. But tornadoes are all part of it. And in my 20 years, actually 25 years of doing trauma, saw a lot of traumatic events, mostly car accidents, gunshot wounds, but also stabbings, because the Knife and Gun Club is very active after midnight or so. But the tornadoes also brought people in, mostly from the surrounding areas in Dallas, because they didn't have a level 1 trauma center in their community, so they would helicopter them in, or sometimes ambulance them in, because obviously helicopters can't fly in the bad weather. But people can get pretty banged up from not so much the wind or the change in the barometric pressure, but the torrents of water that come associated with these tornadoes. Actually, my physical therapist was minding his own business at a stoplight, and the skies were gray and looking threatening, but everything was dry where he was, and he was in a low area and happened to look at his left as the wave hit. And again, he's at a stop sign or a stoplight, dry, but this wall of water comes and hits his car, washes him off the road, and carries him down the highway a good bit before the car is then on dry ground. But it just goes to show you how quickly things can change. Same is true with your health, particularly if have pinching of the spinal cord due to calcium deposits that form from just normal wear and tear, or some people have genetic conditions that cause them to form calcium deposits up and down their spine. And if that calcium deposit enlarges to a certain size and compresses the main artery, which in this model would be shown as yellow, people have what's known as a spinal stroke. Not as common as a brain stroke, but a spinal stroke, and so they'll lose function of an arm or a leg or a bladder, and those are also traumatic events. So if you're having those kinds of troubles, again, sudden changes in your balance, numbness in your face, clumsy hands, knocking things over when you shouldn't, those are signs of spinal cord malfunction, and those need to be reported to your primary care doctor or a spinal specialist. You're watching the C-Spine Show. I'm Dr. Craig Callewart. Please like, follow, and subscribe. My Jeep is burning oil. This is a 1970 military Jeep, airdrop, commonly used in Vietnam, actually still used in some countries in Africa, although production ended a good 40 years ago, so they're pretty well waning out. I bought mine from Civil Defense because after the military finished using them, they gave them to schools and civil defense agencies who then started to release them to the civilian population, but the military decided they were unsafe on the highway, and so had all of them scrapped, but some of them did manage to give out. I'm a shade tree mechanic, so I know enough to keep these old vehicles running, but I had trouble with this one. It was a Jeep I've had for probably 15 years, and then the engine went bad. And, you know, in all fairness, it was a 55-year-old engine, so I thought, okay, I would just have it rebuilt. The problem is this particular engine was made by Hercules, and Hercules was sold to the White Car Company, and they then went out of business, so parts are kind of hard to find. So I really didn't know what to do, and I started looking around, and my wife's family's out from the Texarkana area, and the Red River Arsenal is a arsenal depot out there that was formed in World War II for the purpose of storing ordnance, so shells, bombs, and all that kind of thing. And over the past 50 years has gone through a number of reformations, and currently is, as I understand it, one of the major producers of military drones for the United States and its allies, as well as I think the only assembly place for lithium batteries that, again, power all this. So it just so happens that since that depot's been there for generations, they have warehouses full of parts. And after the military decides that certain items are no longer serviceable, they sell those parts. And my father-in-law happened to work in the arsenal during his military time, and a short time after, he said, why don't you go talk to the surplus dealers in that area? And as an aside, he didn't know exactly what he was doing when he was there, because he was in a room about the size of what we're in right now, roughly 20 feet by 20 feet, and a cylinder would be slid through the door, and he would then do X, Y, and Z to that cylinder and push it along the conveyor, and another door would open and close. And you just sat in the room waiting for the next cylinder. And apparently, from what he thinks, he was putting together some type of military rocket. But again, for the purpose of secrecy, no one had the big picture, so nobody knew how to put this thing together or assemble it or work it. They just knew their one task, which was bring the chassis in, do these 4 or 5 functions, and then pass it over to somebody else who's in another room. But anyway, so went out to the surplus dealer there, and as best I could tell, they probably had 5,000 Jeep engines in crates or just laying on top of each other, stacked up to the ceiling, which I think was probably 20 some odd foot, as far down as you could see. And these were all engines that were pulled out of the kind of Jeep I have when the military decided that the chassis was unstable, so that they needed to all be scrapped. But since there were still valuable parts, they pulled out the engines and transmissions and whatnot. So after talking to the surplus dealer for a while, I said, how do I know which engine is good? And he goes, you don't. They've been sitting here for 30 years. They're probably all the same. And, some of them looked like they'd been taken out pretty roughly and had broken parts on them. Some looked pretty nice. So just to kind of play with him a bit, I said, well, I want the one that's 20 foot up and 3 rows back. He kind of looked at me like, He goes, I'll tell you what, why don't we go to the back room? And apparently that's where friends and family go. And he had about 7 or 8 nice-looking engines that were probably the pick of what was available there in the warehouse. And so I decided, okay, I'll take one. And he gave me a price and said, I should probably take 2. And it just so happens that they were still attached to transmissions. And he goes, well, it's, an extra $150 for transmissions. And I said, well, I really don't need a transmission. He goes, I'll just take them. I'll give them to you. So I came back home with 2 engines, 2 transmissions. And although these engines are very simple to work on, these Jeeps are very simple to work on, and I really could have done it, I just don't have the time. So I had somebody drop the engine in for me. And again, the way the military designs these things, they're basically power packs, so that the hood comes off, a crane comes in, you pull out the whole power pack, drop in a new power pack, a couple bolts, and you go. So it's really not a hard thing. So I got it going and ran nicely for about 2 or 3 years, then started burning oil. And I thought to myself, well, do I just pull out that power pack and put the other one in, or should I take to somebody who really kind of knows what they're doing? So I did what's called a compression test on the engine, which is a fairly easy thing to do, and found that of the 4 pistons going up and down, 2 of them, the front one and the back one, had bad compression, but the 2 center ones were decent. None of them were good. So I started thinking, well, is this a valve problem or is this a piston ring problem? And it'd be kind of fun to take this apart, but I've got 7 spines to take apart next week, so probably should have somebody help me with this. So I took it in to the local shop, and the guy seemed like he was going to enjoy this problem because unlike everything else he has there, which he has to plug in and get some computer readout, this thing has no sensors, and you really have to use your diagnostic skills. And the diagnostic skills on this, again, very simple engine, are simple. Basically your nose. Does this smell like oil's burning? Does it smell like gasoline's burning? When you pull the spark plug out, do you get a shock or do you not? So that's kind of how you start to troubleshoot these problems. And he goes, well, you did the compression test, but did you do the wet compression test? And I said, well, no, I didn't. I'm not really sure how to do a wet compression test. He goes, I'll call you. So a week goes by, nothing happens. Call him again, and his helper picks up the phone and says, well, we need you to pay us before we do these additional tests. I said, okay. I mean, got my vehicle. It's not like I can come take it back, but okay, I'll pay you. So then more time goes back. And the helper calls me and says, your compression test was, as we talked about, and your wet compression test was the same. And we think the advice from the mechanic is rebuild the engine. So I said, let me think about this. I hang up the phone. I'm thinking, wait, if the dry compression test and the wet compression test are the same, those are tests used to control or assess how the rings are doing in the engine. I really need new valves. But yet they want me to rebuild the whole engine. So I thought about it for a day or two, and then I called and actually spoke to the mechanic. He said, no, that's not what I said. The helper got it wrong. Your wet compression test did much better. You doubled your compression. The problem is your rings and not your valves. I said, well, your helper told me the exact opposite. Long story short, we're in the process of reassessing. But why I'm telling you this story, besides I enjoy mechanics, whether it's on humans or vehicles, is that accurate communication is very important. And there have been many times in my 30-some-odd year career where I've received a test result that was wrong. And you kind of think in your head, wait, this doesn't make sense, because I go and look at the patient and I say, this patient doesn't look like this test result. Let's troubleshoot what's happening. And that's very important. Much in the same way, look at that engine, smell that engine. Is that really what this results are showing us? So one of the things to do when you look for a mechanic, and now I'm talking about a physician, is find a physician you can talk to and with whom you think communication between the two of you is good. Because medicine, like automobile repair, is, particularly old automobiles, is not a straightforward process. There's a lot of tinkering that goes on, if you will. There's a lot of adjustments and fine-tuning that has to happen. And so the ability to communicate well with the mechanic on the car or the surgeon on the spine is important. And where that really gets tested is if there's complications or unexpected happenings. That's when you need to understand why the tests are being done, the results of it, and options of treatment. New shows are uploaded every Wednesday at 9 p.m. to both Facebook and YouTube. I look forward to seeing you then.